urgently needed right now. We're given to understand at least within 48 seconds in Africa, one person is dying of hunger. And that really surpasses that figure that we know that comes from the effects of malaria, that at least in 2 minutes, one person dies in the world. So this is a specter of climate change that we're facing right now, and it's bound to get even worse. And so we do pray God that at least some immediate interventions might come through to save lives in this country. And it's a pity and a collective shame that in this epoch of time in our country, a person should be dying of hunger. This morning, we turn our focus as well on Kenya Kwanza. There is a reason that is being proffered right now that all the parties should collapse and be under UDA. What does it really portend now for the multi-party democracy in this country that we have? Are we also none the wiser, not learning from the Jubilee Alliance Party that morphed to Jubilee Party and a collapsing of all the parties inside Jubilee, and what some of the frustrations these people went through under the Jubilee Party? We shall be discussing that, and also keenly what is happening within ODM right now, especially with the slots within Parliament and the committees. The pivotal one now is, of course, the Public Investment Committee and the Parliamentary Service Commission. Issues and stories of nepotism is coming to the fore as well, looking at the East African Parliament. That is bound also to spark a lot of debate as well. Names have been put forward that people are raising questions on, whether they really pass muster or they have the gravitas to be in those particular, of course, parliament, that is the East African Parliament. We shall be looking at that and a raft of other issues with our panelists here this morning. I'm holding court this morning with Okongo Omogeni, who is the Senator for Nyamira. Also will be joined momentarily by Danson Mungatana, the Senator of Tana River, Hilary Segei, who is the Senator of Bomet, and Farah Maalim, who is Member of Parliament for Dadaab. So we have a packed show this morning. I just want to also acknowledge the presence of Senator Okongo Omogeni, who is joining us this morning up and early. Today he has beat most to the punch in coming early to the studio. Good morning, sir. Before 6 o'clock, you took breakfast.
Normally, always number one.
No, that's not true. The person who used to be early even before was Professor Anyang Nyongo. Yes, very early, punctual. Yeah, before even time. 10 minutes to time is actually in the studio. Good to see you, though.
Yeah, nice to you too.
Getting better and better.
Yeah, I mean, we are gearing on. Of course, just come from Nyamira.
Yeah.
For the weekend at service on Saturday in West Mogrango, Gesiaga SDA.
Yes.
Good prayers, and yesterday I joined Christians for a PhD service, just to catch up with people. Of course, a lot of you and cry. They are telling me the price of essential commodities has really shot up. They are saying they are purchasing sugar at 165 per kilo. It's unbelievable. 2 packets of maize meal is retailing at 220.
220, yes.
20 shillings. The border guys have increased the transport for short distance area where they used to pay 50, they are now paying 70.
Yes.
Coupled with that is the fact that essential drugs are also missing from our hospitals. I think that's for our county government. Like a nearby hospital where I was in charge called Tinga dispensary. There are no medicines in hospital. At a medical facility called Igenaitambe, the doctors, there are no resident doctors. So when people go for treatment at night, they are received by a watchman who tells them there is nobody here. So in short, the cost of living has really shot up. And people are really waiting for the 100 days so that His Excellency President William Ruto can fulfill his promise of bringing down the cost of living. All they remember is they were assured that maize meal, a packet of 2 kilograms of maize meal will be retailing at 100 shillings.
Yes.
I don't know that will come to pass. And they were also told that sugar will also come down to close to 100. Very disappointed. This one I can tell you genuinely from the conversation I had with them. Extremely disappointed that the ASLA fund is turning out to be a loan where they need to run a pension scheme. In fact, one old lady asked me, really, me, I only go to retail tomatoes and onions. How do I join a pension? What is a pension plan for them to, qualify for the ASLA fund? So very, very disappointed. And also to hear that it's a loan.
It's a loan to inculcate the culture of saving.
I'm just giving you feedback.
Oh, this is feedback.
I'm giving you feedback.
But
they're also disappointed.
You need to educate them as well.
No. I'm not the creator of the regional fund. As my coalition was pushing to cushion the vulnerable old people at the village by giving them a stipend of a social support program of 6,000 a month. That's what I knew my party would do to them, for them rather. The idea of ASLA fund came from UDA, but they are disappointed that this is now turning out to be a kind of a facility which is kind of a loan, because they say they borrow at 13%. This one will be a loan at 9%. And I think there's an organization, a lending organization that had earlier gone to the ground and really enticed the people. They took those loans and then their cattle were taken away from their farm. So this idea of
they're scammers already.
This idea of saying is a loan, I'm telling you, it's very unpopular.
Yeah, I think we shall discuss that later. You're just giving a good teaser as well. That is attracting interest rates. And is that what also was given on the ground? Because the promise was that it shouldn't be attracting any interest rate. But we shall look at that much later in the course of the program. Let's see what is fresh off the press this morning. And we begin with the bolder paper. This is the Standard today. Police, they're seeking clues on missing Indians in container of death. That is what we have as a splash here on the front page of the Standard today. Missing trio. It says a blood-stained container said to have been a holding cell and torture chamber of the disbanded police squad is undergoing forensic analysis to establish who was held there. And this story is on page 3, 4, and 5 of the Standard this morning, as you can see it there. And these are the two faces of the Indians who are missing right now, that the police are seeking to have them get in investigation on what really happened, how they're missing so far. All right, poor rains blow to Ruto's food. This also is on all about the security plan. Counties are shelving their development plans to deal with drought that threatens existence of communities. The hope for cheap food is complicated by poor rains and high inputs. And these are the pictures that they are really heart-wrenching when we see this. And this is not just with the livestock, also with the wildlife in our, of course, game reserves as well. The elephants, the zebras also are dying because of hunger. And 40 is the number of years the country last witnessed such devastating climatic conditions. This has never happened for the last 40 years. And these are the pictures so far. And just also to preserve the dignity of the humans also. This also is affecting some of our residents in North Rift who are emaciated, malnourished, and some are dying because of hunger. So poor rains blow to Ruto's food security plan. And this story is well laid out for us on page 8 and 9 of the Standard this morning. We shall continue that conversation because what do we do unless we talk about it? And they say talk is cheap and talk cannot cook rice, but at least it will put pressure on the concerned authorities to do something. This on the sidebar, you have Ruto. Kalonzo has refused to work with us. President says he reached out to Wiper leader Kalonzo Musyoka but was snubbed because the Ukambani leader was comfortable in the opposition. You have this story on page 6. Ruto wooing Kalonzo right now. And China's Xi expands power, rewards allies. President Xi Jinping will have another term as the head of the ruling Communist Party and promoted allies who support his vision of tighter controls. It was a week-long meeting for the CCP party, and that gave an extension, a 5-year term again for Xi Jinping, who is the president or the premier of China. You have his story on page 29. Now this is such a tight grip on power from him, and what does he want from the world? That also was what was headlining the front page of Economist. All that is inside the Standard. Also today, Health and Science come your way. My eyes shrunk in size. Find out how that eye shrunk in size, and you can see a pupil there. Or is it a contact lens? You can follow all that story inside the Health and Science, inside the Standard this morning. Let's see on top here what we have as the flagger before we go to the Daily Nation, which we had a sneak peek there. Now, NEC issues tough rules ahead of exams. You can follow the story on page 10, what these rules are. Also, why tilapia are dying in Lake Victoria. You saw that particular development. There's something that is killing this tilapia in Lake Victoria. Could that be also climate change that sometimes also affect the ecosystem and the biodiversity within, or the pH as well, of the lakes, right? When we talk about the phytoplanktons as well, that can sometimes, or algae that really mushrooms when we have so much heat, and this could be another aspect of climate change as well, that people are wondering what is killing this fish in Lake Victoria. Electricity price go up yet again. We are in for it. We're always waiting for another shoe to drop, and here it is. Electricity price or prices go up yet again. The cost of energy is becoming untenable, and remedial measures need to be, of course, swiftly intervened or given right now so that we may at least try and contain the situation. Saying stop Arsenal from marching on. That is another story that you want to follow inside the Standard this morning. This is how it looks for you today. The Standard. This picture is really heart-wrenching. I can shake it off from my head of the cow that just died, and many are dying so far. The Daily Nation is holding a splash for us. Kalonzo refused job offer, says Ruto. This is what is the splash here. President William Ruto yesterday said he had made deliberate efforts to engage Wiper leader Kalonzo Musyoka, including offering him a job in his government, which he flatly declined. That story tucked away on page 5 of the Daily Nation this morning. Also, Raila orders probe into election laws. He is unrelenting. That is the story of Raila on the sidebar there. Post-election plan, opposition leader Raila Odinga has ordered an audit of the last election, which he lost narrowly to President William Ruto, to assess his vulnerabilities and understand the reasons behind his loss. This even as he faces an internal rebellion that will test his grip on his political constituency. That story continues on page 7 of the Daily Nation this morning. And oh my, you just look at that story. I was telling you, you saw the livestock, and now this is in Turkana. Turkana is in the throes of hunger, and there is a humanitarian crisis right now. We arrive at Mr. Namonio Echoto's homestead at 11 in the morning. We find him sitting on his traditional stool, Ekichalong, pensively watching his family as they eat acacia seed pods from a bowl. It is all we have, Mr. Echoto says, lifting his tearful gaze from his children, whose sunken eyes tell their own story. And you can follow this story on page 10 of the Daily Nation. In a country where we have supply constraints, much of abundance in one area of the country, and of course, lack on the other side of the country, where people and the land is just as dry as a crunch. And this is a biting hunger in Turkana. These pictures should really provoke us to think deeply and also to awaken our conscience right now on the food systems and food security in this country. And this is what also the current regime is grappling it right now as far as food security is concerned. This is really telling and really heart-wrenching. May God help us. Let's see what we have on the front page of The Star. Inside Kalonzo's plan to take over Raila stronghold. That is what we have on the front page of The Star this morning. Eye on 2027. Wiper Boss has started debate over intent to succeed Odinga. Former VP seems to be borrowing from President William Ruto's playbook. And you have that story on page 4 and 5 of The Star this morning. Mudavadi, this is how I will restore trust in government. Prime Minister, or no, Cabinet Secretary, I should say, nominee Musalia Mudavadi has said he will restore the trust Kenyans had in government after he assumes office. He said that his office is the fulcrum upon which delivery of public services will be measured and therefore a place where public trust will be cultivated. You have the story tucked away on page 7 of The Star this morning. Rest to replace IBC Chairman Chebukati starts. President William Ruto has started the succession process at the IBC. The president on Saturday put out a public notice to constitute a panel for the recruitment of the next IBC chairman and 2 commissioners. A gazette notice, of course, declaring the vacancies also was issued there. You have the story on page 8. Cop kills 2 colleagues, self in Moyale. And you can follow the story on page 28 of The Star this morning. Murder in hospital. Knife-wielding patient stabs US-based nurse to death. Find all the details about this gory story there on page 3 of The Star, where it's tucked away. Let's move on and we see what we have on the front page of the Business Daily. China loans to Kenya fall for first time in 2 decades is a splash this morning. Total lending dipped to $6.83 billion in June from $7.5 billion a year ago. Records show marginal drop in 2002. It's all about the public debt. You can follow the story on page 2 of the Business Daily. Karauri risks jail over sports special brand court order. Directors of the Betting Control and Licensing Board, BCLB, and principals of Gambling Farm Milestone Games risks jail and fines for defying the High Court in the continued use of sports spacer brand in Kenya's gaming business. You can follow the story on page 2 of the Business Daily this morning. Linturi eyes idle state land in food plan. That is the way to go. Agriculture Cabinet Secretary nominee Mithika Linturi says parastatals with idle land will be compelled to surrender them for lease to private investors for commercial agriculture should Parliament clear his appointment. And you have the story on page 4 of the Business Daily. Yes, a lot of land they lay idle that are owned by parastatals for many years. And I think also that can be utilized. Is a good way for asset sweating and asset utilization in this country. And this is what the Cabinet Secretary nominee there of Agriculture is alluding to. You can follow the story on page 4 of the Business Daily this morning. The East African is up next. Why General Muhoozi remains defiant. We believe that he enjoys youth support. He reckons he has the charisma and political acumen to inherit Museveni's mantle. You have the story on page 7 of the Business, not the Business, but the East African this week. You can read all about it. Also, East Africa Railway Link plans off track, riddled with debt, graft and shrinking cargo volumes. Region's rail managers grapple with a train of failures. Tough task for Ruto's ministers. The Kenyan leader wants his cabinet to help achieve a borderless EAC. Right? Find it how tough it is for him, or it will be for him. You can follow the story on page 5 of the East African this week. Let's cross over to Rwanda to see how they're faring on. And this is the New Times. Kigali City Miles Master Plan for non-motorist or non-motorized transport is a splash there. Kigali City Miles Master Plan for non-motorized transport, all in an effort to green the city. And we can see cyclists ride bicycles in Kigali. Officials say a master plan of non-motorized transport in the city of Kigali is being developed and will be complete by June next year. Right? You can follow the story inside the New Times. And 5 changes poised to reshape the justice sector. Also, South Koreans in Rwanda celebrate National Foundation. You can follow all that inside the New Times in Rwanda. I will try and show you what we have in the editorial cartoons this morning. Much later. We'll come back to this. But allow me to introduce our panelists who are already here. You heard the voice of Okongo Omogeni. And now we want to hear from Danson Mungatana and Hilary Segei. Good morning, gentlemen. Good to see you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, welcome.
Good to see you too.
You had a lovely weekend.
Yes.
Yes, how was Tana River?
It was great. We have a problem with the drought.
Indeed.
Yes, we have really serious water scarcity. Some of the areas, the river has turned away from the original course, therefore occasioning, problems to the residents of all those areas. Some other places, the river has actually dried up, so we have to deal with the issues of water scarcity. I think for me, from my point of view, the government of Uhuru Kenyatta concentrated so much on infrastructure on roads. I pray that the government of William Ruto will concentrate on infrastructure for irrigation so that water becomes available everywhere, starting from the ASLA areas, in particular Tana River County. Yes.
Yeah, indeed.
Yes,
of course, you've got to vote for your county.
Yes. And we are grateful, by the way, that the president, in his speech during the Mashujaa Day, he specifically said in the Tana Delta, he was going to put up irrigation plants, a lot of land under irrigation. So we think that if the president goes that direction of making massive investment in irrigation, then the country will not have food scarcity, and even if the rains fail to come, we will be able to feed our population and keep our country safe. Because when people are hungry, the country becomes unsafe to live in. So I think that's the way I look at it.
All right. Hilary, let's hear how is Bomet faring?
Bomet is good. It was a short weekend for that matter, particularly where Kenyans, we really hoped that we would have today as a public holiday. And I remember at some point
having today as a public holiday because it's Diwali?
Yes, Kenyans in their usual way actually created a fake gazette notice against the name of the CS for internal security. And I remember I got a few phone calls whether it was indeed...
To confirm if it's coming from...
Exactly. So Bomet was quite okay, great, as usual, but the big challenge, of course, is also what my colleague, Senator Mokatana said, drought. It's a real threat. And though we have had a session in Senate to ask the government to declare it a national disaster, we can't wait longer. It is that real. Certain sections of Bomet County, I think, two wards, actually two constituencies fully, are suffering a similar challenge. That's Chapalungu and parts of Bomet East. It is not nice at all. There is no food. There is no water. The entire farming that was largely done, which is normally the food basket of the country, is not doing very well. It is time to do a better option of either making sure that being a national disaster, investment be actualized in those areas. And I hope that the government of William Ruto will, as they have said, actualize that issue of making sure that there is an effort to supply or to avail. They talked about doing more dams. We hope that will be done as soon as yesterday. It is not nice at all. That has spilled over across the country. We have got right now Kitui, Tana River, Meru. Yesterday, I'm sure we all saw from the news about the disputes inter-community that's already existing. And not because of anything, because herders, pastoralist, camel owners are crossing over, looking for water and pasture. In the process, trampling over their neighbors, and it is bad news as we speak now. Let's hope the week that is coming will give us some better opportunities that comes with the hope of action being done. But otherwise, we're looking forward, as I always say, to a better week, a better month, and of course a better governance as we have promised our people, the Kenyans.
Right.
Yeah.
Don't you think right now, even just looking at the dailies there, we were looking at these pictures where you have the standard there, poor rains blow, and you can see a very gory, heart-wrenching, gutting picture there of a livestock which has collapsed and died, and looking also on the front page of the Daily Nation as well, in the throes of hunger. And you can see there's a young boy there who has actually curled himself into a ball there. This is just the biting effects of hunger, and the way they've written it as well. It's a whippy-teary way of, just telling us how hunger is affecting. This is a Choto's homestead, and they found him sitting on his traditional stool, as they say, pensively watching his family as they eat acacia seeds pods from a bowl. It's all we have, he says, and lifting his tearful gaze from his children, whose sunken eyes tell their own stories, and we've seen features done here in the media so far. Should we be gravitating our conversation more or less to, the effects of hunger as it is right now, but primarily the scarcity of water? The scarcity of water, as you mentioned, in Tana River, and the abundance of water in Turkana that is not potable, but can be desalinated, as they say, and I've always talked in this particular forums and many, that can actually supply this country for the next 72 years with water. I think the biggest challenge for President William Ruto right now would be to try, and he's actually talked about it quite volubly, saying that we are seeking, private partnerships. And the greatest challenge with that potable water or unpotable water in Turkana has been that the cost of desalination is exorbitant and prohibitive. In light of what we're going through, the government should move every inch of the way to make sure that at least that expanse water table that we have in Turkana can supply the rest of this country with water. We should be having, I think even from his speech, the greatest effort that we hear from government in trying to desalinate this water so that we can feed the country. We have the water. It's not an issue of lack of water and scarcity. The water is there.
I think so.
Can we let's begin it, then we'll come to you.
Yes.
We have the water.
Dibal first, I really want to empathize and feel sorry for these Kenyans. When you look at this picture, 40 years after independence, for a country like Kenya, it's really sad. Being a leader, you feel saddened. And speaking objectively, I would have expected that our president would have symbolically visited these Kenyans, maybe with some food donations, to show the concern the government has for their lives and the livestock that is being lost up in the north and in many counties. For me, that ought to be our priority, because no government in the world can sit back and watch its own citizens dying from hunger. So I really hope that the government will focus its energy this week towards finding solutions for the many Kenyans who are facing hunger and starvation. Watching Kenyans who can't afford a meal a day, while some of us are very comfortable in church attending a service, is disheartening. I mean, you can just place yourself in the shoes of these parents, if you are the father and the mother of those children, who can't just get a normal meal of just ugali and sukuma wiki. They cannot afford it. It is really saddening, and I hope we need to see some urgent interventions by the government. If this was in the US, you would even be forced to resign. You cannot continue in office even for one more day if you sit back and watch your people dying from hunger. So this calls for urgent intervention. I hope the Uda administration will do something. Now, going back to the issues being raised by Mungatana, you know, Dibal, it's unfortunate that the Jubilee government that was headed by Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto was unable to actualize the Galana Kulalu irrigation project, a project that had set aside about 1.7 million hectares of land, which was supposed to be irrigated so that we can improve our food security. And Dibal, you know, the people who really frustrated that project, because we looked at it in the last parliament, are cartels in maize importation and the millers who never wanted this project to be actualized so that they can continue playing around with this idea of government gazetting duty-free importation of maize so that they can make a kill out of it. So we are trying to do business with the lives of Kenyans. The poor people facing hunger and starvation don't know about this idea of people who want to be overnight millionaires, cartels. So the first thing we need to do is really to ensure that there is good governance. We must deal with the cartels who don't want us to have our own food security. Yeah. I don't know what Uda can tell us about this Galana Kulalu project, because it was a big, massive project that would have really turned around the issue of hunger in a number of counties in the northern Kenya. And then, of course, when we speak of dams, I really hope we are going to find answers where money that was meant for Aurora and Kimore disappeared to. Because you remember that was a huge scandal last time. So before you even tell Kenyans...
But don't you think we need some quick wins right now, instead of really going and...
I'm talking about the long.
Long term. Let's talk about the short term right now, because we have this thing within us.
The short term, I've said, I don't know how to emphasize what I've said. The government has an obligation to have an urgent, quick intervention on this matter. And I want to appeal to the president to lead from the front. He actually should be the one who should witness the delivery of food support programs. Because the reality is these guys are not faking it. These guys are facing hunger and starvation. They don't have the necessities. Even I read a story, I think, in one of the papers. You can't believe this, that the most precious commodity for these people is a bottle of drinking water. Not even the breakfast that we had this morning. They're just looking for a bottle of water. So you can imagine the dehydration the children are facing up there. So let's really put aside for now the politics and concentrate on interventions that can save these people. And the intervention is we need to have government mobilize foodstuffs, water, and then deliver them to these people at the ground. You cannot, if you tell them now that you want to supply them with fertilizer so that they can grow their food, that will not provide answers. As you have rightly put it, Dibal, even if you tell them that you are going to have a program to have in place 100 dams, that will not provide the immediate solution that they are looking at. We adjourned the other day in the Senate to discuss this matter. And in a bipartisan approach, the rallying call was for the government to look for funds so that food can be delivered to these people. The government can also consider, this is the time that the government should consider setting aside some funds that should support these families up there. And I think as Kenyans, we need to unite on this call every day till we see that the government is acting, not even tomorrow, it should have acted yesterday, Dibal. Yeah.
Yesterday, we had Mungatana talking about declaring a national disaster, this famine or drought that we are in right now. My question will be again, what does it really, what sort of substantial difference does it make when you declare it a national disaster? Because year in, year out, we've been declaring national disaster of drought and famine in this country. And for me, I've never seen the rhyme and reason behind it. Maybe today I'll seek to understand from you, when we declare it, what does it portend? What does it do? How does it change the situation?
when a government declares a national disaster for anything, even if it is just, let's say, malaria or sickness or COVID or whatever, what it means is that there is going to be a short-circuiting of the normal processes of procurement.
Okay.
There's going to be like emergency powers given to the government. So that now, instead of us saying that we are going to, bring maize, maybe we need 100 bags of maize in this particular area. Now, instead of us going through the normal processes of procurement using the Procurement Act, it becomes a very short process. People are basically handpicked, and then the process for delivery becomes the issue rather than the process of procurement itself. So that is the significance of declaration of an emergency. And it helps. It helps because the government now is able to exercise powers to save life other than to follow procedures. So that is why the Senate was appealing to His Excellency the President to declare it a national disaster. And I know the processes are being followed because when we had some consultations as senators from our Kenya Kwanza side, the issue was also brought up. And His Excellency said that there's a plan, because I am aware that, like, at least in Tana River County, there's a team that has been set up, and I think this has been replicated in many counties, to give the actuals, what is the situation here, the situation there, so that we have real-time information. And then based on that information, I think when the declaration of emergency is done, then there will be specific measures that are being made to deal with those issues in specific areas, so that you don't send to a certain place 1,000 bags, yet it only needs 200. You don't send to a place which has need for 5,000 bags, you send them 500 bags. So I think those teams that have been constituted are sort of giving through the provincial administration the live situation, so that when that declaration comes, we will be able to get interventions that are relevant to specific regions.
But can we just look at some of the low-hanging fruits that we can mull over here as a panel today, for the government also to think about, and even maybe from the Senate, and from the National Assembly, you can come up with a quick legislation on how we can steamroll that with the ascension of the president, especially what I'm putting on the table so far, because we're discussing this Turkana aquifer.
Yes.
And nothing has been done for the last, I think, a decade since this was discovered. And now we have a situation. And what I'm trying to say is we have water, but it's not potable water.
Yes.
Then what do we do if it's not potable water? You as legislators then, what are some of the remedial measures you can come up with in terms of legislation to alleviate this situation? Because this is emergency, right? If you wait for you to come up with a national or declaration of disaster, how do you circumvent that? Because people are dying. We can't wait for the processes of legislation to go through at a snail pace speed at the end of the day. We need quick intervention. This is a legislation, just as we were having the specter of the Al-Shabaab in Somalia, and you had an emergency, calling of the senators and the National Assembly, and of course the legislation was passed quickly, and President Mwai Kibaki quickly ordered down the troops to go to Somalia. Something can be done about this. For me, what I feel is we're not treating this situation as we should. We're politicking at the end of the day, and we shouldn't. I'm not saying that politics should continue, but I think we should have priorities as a country. What I'm feeling is, even for me to come and politic here, and we have this spectre, it really goes against the conscience of my conscience. I feel this is a primary thing that we should be putting all our heads down and wait to try and see how we can alleviate this. I think that is my concern.
Debal,
could we hear from? We will come to you, Congo.
Yeah, let me say this. You've put it the way it's supposed to be. Same case here applies to what my colleague Okongo said.
Yes.
It is something that is dire. We cannot wait any longer. However, we have enough legislation. We don't really need to legislate in order to make sure that this is worked out by the government.
What are these legislations?
In Kenya, we have almost legislated on everything the above.
But I want to know primarily what are these legislation.
Yes, I was getting there. Instead of even talking about making a law to assist the government to declare the drought a national disaster and to avail the waters from Lake Turkana, we don't need the legislation for two reasons. One, we're looking at 4.5 million Kenyans in need of food ratios today. Yes. 4.5 million. That is, I think, what the papers are saying. Now, in terms of availing food supplies to these people, the government does not need a legislation. That is now the low-hanging fruit. Do we have supplies in some farms, some private investors? Do we have food? Do we have grain stores where they are holding on to them? I'm very sure yes. But then, the idea is, as we've always said, Kenyans are full of ideas. You have a very important idea. My colleague here has a very important idea. Same case here. When we speak about the government of Jubilee that had the Galana Kulalu project, it didn't require much more than that which was done in terms of legislation created, but then the cartels are killing it. In this one, we only need the goodwill of the government of the day, which I know we do have. Once the Senate has adjourned to have a discussion on this disaster, the National Assembly, the same thing. We do not need anything beyond the president making the declaration and doing that which Honorable Mukatara said, not necessarily circumventing the law that is in existence. No. Lake Turkana is the largest desert lake in the world, I believe. Desert lake. Your interest is as good as my interest. How can we tap that water? In the plan of the Kenya Kwanza government, water supply is a priority item, but it will not come in a week or in 2 weeks' time. The 4.5 million Kenyans are in need of that food ratio as early as yesterday. We will not even be fair to begin saying let's debate in the House for purposes of legislating so that the government can supply them. Remember, it's a constitutional requirement of the government to make sure that its people at least can live. Food, shelter is a priority item. When you look at these pictures, page 10 of the Standard, it is not interesting. It's an eyesore. When you ask yourself, what do you do? I saw yesterday in Ganze, I think it was a story in the media, Ganze, a school where some boy came in, he did not have dinner, he didn't have breakfast, he's been forced to go to school because it is only in school where he can get a cup of tea from the school feeding program. One of the things that we could immediately do, as I was saying, is now, let's push to have a school feeding program continue, especially in areas which are identified. Our biggest undoing is where people with no values take over good programs and hold on to, for example, the food supplies for sale to make money out of it, yet people are dying. If we were to reopen and continue to have that program up and running, we will be feeding almost half of the 4.5 million Kenyans we're talking about. Then secondly, the goodwill in terms of declaration of this as a national disaster will help us to make sure that all those that we have in our private stores, grain storage facilities, is purchased by the government upon that declaration and supplied to the people. It is that bad. And my feeling is that we do not need to wait for a legislation to be done.
Indeed.
We don't need to.
In Mukatana, we don't need quick action right now. You wanted to say something.
No, we don't need. I wanted to make it clear that executive action is faster than legislative action.
Indeed.
So that if the president is to make a move, the law allows him even to spend in advance, and then the National Assembly can legalize that expenditure. So what we should be looking at, and I wanted to agree with Honorable Mogeni, is that we need the government, as it were, to drop everything else,
Indeed,
and focus on this issue of hunger. Short-term measures and long-term measures. And then the supplementary estimates are coming, and I'm sure the president and his team are working on what they are going to bring to the National Assembly. They should focus on quick intervention, you know, to solve this problem. You know, I was very annoyed during Mashujaa Day, and in my speech I said it, that food was flagged off from State House, and Marsabit, I don't know, Isiolo, and several other counties that were affected. We were told, even our governors were invited. My governor didn't go, but the deputy governor was there. And we were there waiting for the flagging off of the food supplies as quick interventions for Tana River. It was not there. And even by the time we were having Mashujaa Day, it was not there, you know. And the situation is very bad in Tana River. So I'm thinking that the government should stop being busy, you know. I don't know, doing what and what and what. The government and this administration should go back and look, where is the food? The other day, I saw Senator Cherarge on the floor of the House saying that in Nandi County, they get rains every day. In fact, he said it's only 1 month in their whole entire year that they don't get rains. There's food. His problem was we don't have roads to remove that food to where it is needed. Now, if that is the issue, then the government should be asking those questions. Where's the food? Is it in Trans Nzoia County, where we know there's a lot of maize? Is it in Nandi County, where we know there's a lot of rains? Then get that food out of there to the needy areas, you know, the needier areas of our nation. This is where I think all the meetings, all the plannings and everything should be focused on. And this is where I think the supplementary estimates should be focused on, so that when that declaration comes, people can see real effort on the ground. We don't want to waste this opportunity again. And then Kenyans need to be told, these are the short-term measures. The long-term measures are the following. So the country can also not expect next year to come again talk about the same issues. By next year, we should be talking about executing the plan that is already in place. So for me, I am with everybody who says, let us drop everything else, let us look at the drought situation, and let us resolve it short-term and long-term. That is what I would say for now.
All right. Let's hear from Farah Malim. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. And we are looking at the situation that is so dire right now. And we've heard just from Dansko Mungatana that the government needs to drop everything else and primarily focus on this situation now that is so dire and urgent for the country. Hunger. I know you remember Parliament from Dadaab. You can tell us, because this is a region that has been adversely affected by rain. I heard you last time talking about, for the last 3 good years, you've not seen rain.
Yes.
What can we do as an intervention right now? We circumvent all this bureaucracy and the dead hand of bureaucracy with legislation. We get an executive order from the president.
Dibal, it does not take... You don't need to be a rocket scientist to understand how to solve the problems of this perennial suffering of droughts and being held hostage by the vagaries of the weather itself. It's very easy to deal with that. And I said here, right here, in your own station here, I dealt with it myself in the drought of 2010, 2011. And I did not lose one head of livestock. What happens in our side, I mean, he comes from a pastoral area, so he understands it. Usually, the water points are few. But because the water points are few, the area around the water points gets degraded very fast and the grass is exhausted. So the cows and the goats and sheep have got to go distant, very far distant, to access pasture. But then come back again after only 3 days to access water. Cattle cannot stay for more than 3 days without water. They die of thirst. Not like camels. Camels can stay for the longest. So then they die on the way. They die on the way. I mean, you go in there, and then 3 days, the animals trek for about 3 days to go. So the best way to deal with this is take water to where the pasture is. Take water to where the cows are having pasture. I engaged in 59 water boozers in 2010, 2011, myself during that drought. I remember we paid less than 200 million Kenya shillings for them, and we did not lose one head. Right now, when you see animals are dead, they're always dead. You see the carcasses in places near water points, mostly because they came back to look for water, but then they cannot again go back for 3 more days to go and access pasture. They die on the way. But if you take water to where the animals are, then of course it becomes very easy. You can save that livestock. Then we have to come up with some, I wouldn't say brilliant, it doesn't have to be so brilliant, ways to try and also grow grass. Grow grass. I'm told in certain areas, in a similar environment like in Namibia, I'm told, in Botswana, the rest of it, they spray from the air the seedlings of grass to wait for the rainy season and then for the grass to sprout on there. Just spray, that's all. You know what I mean? The same way you spray crops. You have that, the rains come, the grass is plenty. And you can even put it in together and bale it up and keep it for a rainy day. There are a lot of things that can be done. But the problem, the biggest problem, is that successive governments in this country have never, for a moment, cared about the plight of the pastoralist nomadic society. It doesn't matter whether it is in terms of trying to give them food security, whether it's in terms of trying to give them proper health facilities, or whether it's in terms of educating their children. As it is right now, we know this is a problem. We don't have teachers. We'll find a whole class of 8 classrooms, and there's only 1 or 2 teachers. 5,000 teachers were withdrawn by the government. They did not run away because of insecurity. Withdrawn by the government. Withdrawn by the TSC, none other than TSC. What is that? We understand it. The same way you look at Masai land here. Masai land is a very highly potential area. Highly, more potential than anywhere else. But they still got to suffer the same problems that we're suffering ourselves. From colonial times, the colonial government was never kind to pastoralists. They took away all the lands from the Masais. Whether it's the ranches, Delamere's, almost 1 million acres, whether it is like Kipia, those sides. They took away all the grazing lands for the Masais and the Nandis to some extent, those early days. To the extent of even moving the Nandis to Uganda for them to perish.
Right.
So successive government, the Kenyan government, successive, right from sessional paper number 10 of 1965.
Yes.
Let me just finish this. From sessional paper 10 of 1965 to date, we have never had a government that for one moment is willing to spend a little bit of money into that sector and those people. I think they kind of wished us away just to perish, and like the Red Indians, you know what I mean? The Red Indians of the Americas and disappear. But we are not disappearing. Let me tell you one thing, we're not disappearing. We're not going to disappear. Every time there's a drought,
Thank you.
over 200,000 pastoralists will come into the major cities. For information, let me tell you one thing. They will come to Nairobi, they will from Turkana, from Marsabit, from Northeastern Province, and those are the ones that you will claim are taking over, here and there.
Thank you.
They will end up becoming very, very successful, because that's the only way. You want to keep them there.
Thank you.
Take care of them there.
Allow me to take a short break right now. When we circle back, of course, we continue with that and thereafter other issues as well. And we try and analyze, of course, last week's CS nominees. This week, they will be shaking into place upon the approval by the National Assembly, and of course now appointment by the President thereafter. Also, we are looking at what is happening in Kenya Kwanza, the falling of parties, that all of them that are in Kenya Kwanza to UDA. What does it really portend? Where we are streamlining